It's starting now. All right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining this webinar on virtual worlds and immersive realities. It's great to see lots of you on the call today. My name is Gareth Cort. I am part of the digital citizenship team at European Schoolnet, and I'm also joined by my colleague Anna Rita. And we're going to guide you through this session today. Please do note that the session is being recorded for teachers that aren't able to join us at live today, so just make sure obviously you keep that in mind, but please do free to ask any questions in the chat as we go through, and we will look out for them, and we'll be popping details in the chat of other useful things as well. There is also a Mentimeter that you can have a go at filling in to provide some input and some ideas as we go through the session, and I'll provide some instructions on how to go through that as well. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll get started on the session on what is a very interesting and fast-moving topic of this whole idea of virtual worlds. So, bear with me a second because I'm on two different screens. So let me just get back to the right slides. There we go. Before we dive into the topic, really important just to mention some of the other fantastic things that we have on our Better Internet for Kids portal. You may have been familiar with this already, but if not, it's well worth exploring our BIK Teacher Corner, and the URL is on the slides here, and the slides will be made available after the recording as well. And it is our one-stop shop for learning and teaching about all aspects of online safety, digital citizenship, and media literacy. So there's lots and lots of training modules on there. There's self-directed, completely free to access, don't require any kind of account to sign up or anything like that. You can go straight on, you can read through them and try them out. There are one or two practical activities you can try out amongst them as well. And they give you information on various topics. They give you advice as an educator and how you can support your learners, as well as signposting to lots of great resources that are out there that obviously we've been part of creating, but also our wonderful InSafe network of safer internet centres have created across the EU as well. So lots and lots of resources all over the place that you can make use of. We also take the opportunity to spotlight other useful things, including some of the MOOCs that we're running on the European Schoolnet Academy site. So that's a useful way of learning about those through the Teacher Corner as and when they pop up. And there's also some great guidance on there about the Digital Services Act and a handbook that's very useful for all educators too. Just to give you a very quick overview of what the Teacher Corner contains, just so you know a bit more. Basically, it has 4 introductory modules that are really, really useful for establishing and understanding the base information around online safety. And you can see it covers things such as children's rights in a digital world, a broad understanding of online safety risks and how they relate to children and young people, different approaches and considerations to teaching online safety, media literacy and digital citizenship, and the importance of adopting and working towards a whole school approach in your work around digital literacy, media literacy, digital citizenship, and online safety as well. So those are the 4 introductory modules that we recommend all teachers work their way through in their own time and at their own pace on the Teacher Corner. And then in addition to those are a number of different deep dive modules that we're adding to on a regular basis. And you can see from the slide here, covering a broad range of specific topics, from cyberbullying to mis and disinformation, to NFTs and cryptocurrencies, to sextortion, to algorithms, to generative AI, and beyond. So if you're not familiar or less familiar with some of these areas, then you can explore the ones that maybe you want to kind of increase your knowledge on. You can work through those, and obviously within those are lots of useful resources that can take your learning further as well. So please do check out the Teacher Corner if you haven't already. So that brings us quite nicely to a topic that is going to appear in the Teacher Corner. So there is going to be a deep dive on virtual worlds coming very, very soon. But we're going to be talking about this whole concept of virtual worlds and immersive environments. Before I provide a working definition of what those things are, I thought it might be quite nice to throw the floor open to you to have a little think about what you think virtual worlds actually are, what they entail, what they include in terms of games, or apps or particular types of devices that maybe are used to access or create these things. So in order to have a go at this, and it'd be great if you can join in, is to head over to www.menti.com and then enter the code that you can see on the screen here, 12401530. If you've got a mobile device handy and a QR code scanner on it, then you can also scan the QR code that is on this slide, and that will take you through to it as well. And Anna Rita has very kindly just popped into the chat the details too. So just bear with me a moment, because I'm going to stop sharing this screen of my slides, and I'm going to head over to the Menti and share that as well. All the joining instructions for joining the Menti will be visible on my shared screen when it comes back in a second. So don't worry if you don't capture these details at the time. So bear with me a moment. I'm just going to stop sharing here, and then we're going to head over and share this one instead. And hopefully now you can now see the Menti. And these are the answers that will come in from you as you enter them. And you can enter up to 5 different things. And these will come in and be displayed in our word cloud. So as they come in, the word cloud will move and change. And any words that are used that people duplicate should appear larger than others. And I can see we've already got 1 response in so far. Thank you so much. Or in fact 2 now. We've got metaverses, we've got gaming, we've got social VR, we've got the use of avatars, we've got technology such as VR headsets, we've got risks that may be presented such as lies, we've got video and photos, of course, another form of media that can exist within virtual worlds and these kind of environments as well. So I'll just give you a couple of moments just to enter some more ideas, and we can see some of those responses coming in. Fantastic. I can see, obviously, you can see gaming is appearing much larger, so that's suggesting a number of people have mentioned that. We've got other people talking about headsets. We've got mention in there of AI, which is another good example. We've got other devices like smartphones that maybe are used for an augmented reality approach. We've got some mentions of specific sites and services within there too, including things like Minecraft and Canva. And indeed, I really like the comment there that someone's put this whole idea of blurring of worlds as well. The fact that these immersive environments can be so immersive that it can be difficult at times to distinguish what is within them and what is outside of them sometimes. And we'll come back to that point in a little while. So I'll just give you a few more moments in case you are adding anything to our word cloud. And after this session has finished, I will take a screenshot of the word cloud and drop it into these slides so that you can actually see the output of these in the future as well. But do feel free to take a screenshot of this shared screen if you like, before we move back to the presentation slides in a moment. Okay, fantastic. And it's great to see someone's also mentioned on there Roblox, which is a really interesting example of a different kind of virtual worlds in comparison to something such as more of a metaverse one, such as virtual reality or augmented reality as well. Brilliant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing that and head back to our slides, but please do feel free to keep inputting into that Menti if you so wish. It's still open and it will still collect your results. We will be coming back to that Menti a little bit later with another question for you to fill a word cloud with. So please don't close that on your web browser. Keep that open because we will be coming back to that a little bit later. Right, so I'm just going to move back to my slides. Bear with me a moment. Brilliant. So hopefully you can now see my slides again. So thank you for all of those suggestions and those inputs. And you're absolutely right. And the first thing I think really to talk about in this area is that we're talking about a very broad area that can be defined in a number of different ways. So just to offer up one definition that can help with this, it's actually a definition from the European Commission themselves in 2023, where they have considered virtual worlds to be persistent immersive environments based on technologies, many of which you talked about in your word cloud here, including 3D and extended reality, which make it possible to blend physical and digital worlds in real time for a variety of purposes, such as designing, making simulations, collaborating, learning, socializing, carrying out transactions, or providing entertainment. And that's a really interesting thing with virtual worlds and these types of immersive environments, is that they exist just outside of entertainment, which is where maybe many of us are familiar with it through VR headsets and gaming and things like augmented reality. But it is actually used in a variety of different industries, for training simulations, for experimentation of other things, for creating virtual spaces for people to interact in terms of business terms rather than just social terms. So there are lots and lots of different applications. Of course, many of those applications aren't going to be relevant to you as an educator, and they aren't going to be relevant to your learners. So we are going to be focusing more on how children and young people are using these things and the opportunities and risks that exist around this, as well as things you need to consider as an educator to support them as well. But here's just a little list that reflects, I think, many of the things that you mentioned in the word cloud as well. Virtual reality, as you mentioned, so this so-called metaverse of accessing different virtual worlds through VR headsets. And of course, that can be on games consoles, that can be standalone headsets that work independently of any other technology. And to an extent, it still involves things such as the classic Google Cardboard, where you can actually take your smartphone and download virtual reality apps and slot it in to a cardboard headset with a set of lenses. So virtual reality can take many different forms, both from the budget end right up to the high end, quite expensive, quite sophisticated technology. We've got things such as augmented reality, which has been around for a number of years already on things such as smartphone apps, where you can hold a smartphone up and use the camera and a particular app to point at something, and then additional details pop up on your screen. It could be 3D models, it could be information overlays, other things that augment your experience and provide additional information. Those have been used in games as well, and you might have noticed the most recent VR headsets, things such as the Meta Quest 3, made by Meta, does actually now feature cameras, color cameras on the front of the headset to allow augmented reality experiences. So that particular device operates as both a virtual reality headset, where you're exploring 3D virtual worlds, but also that you can experience augmented reality through the cameras on the front, mixing real life and virtual reality features together. You've then got things such as extended reality, which again is kind of taking that to a further extreme of sort of mixing those dynamics. And I've thrown in here as well, I think, depending on your perspective, you can also consider virtual worlds to also include a number of 3D game worlds and spaces, some of which that have been out there for a very, very long time. If you are familiar with popular online games, what we call MMOs, massive multiplayer online games, games that have been around for, I don't know, 15 years or so, things like World of Warcraft and other games like shooters like Destiny 2, and even things such as Grand Theft Auto 5's online mode could be considered persistent worlds. They exist all the time, regardless of whether or not people are logged into it. But when people are logged into it, they can interact in different ways. These worlds may have established events and things that happen. They may have established currencies that actually take place. Some in the past have even offered this whole idea of virtual real estate, being able to actually buy digital space in these virtual worlds that actually belongs to you and can be used solely by you. So a number of 3D games can also be considered to exist in this whole idea of virtual worlds. And I think Roblox is another kind of example of that. It's not accessed for most people through a VR headset, but it offers the opportunity to be immersed in different kind of worlds and experiences and simulations that can't be experienced in other forms of games. So you could even consider Roblox as part of that as well. As I mentioned, simulation is part of that too. So the ability to create scenarios and situations that you wouldn't be able to do in real life. If you ever tried, I think it's the BBC, have got a fantastic space simulator that you can do with a VR headset, and you can download it for free. And you basically get to go and do a spacewalk on the outside of the International Space Station. And yes, it's obviously something that most of us are not going to be able to do in real life, but you can simulate that experience through this technology. So it enables experiences that aren't usually available to most of us. And as I said there, and more, you may feel there are other examples and other tools, and you may have noticed that some of the most popular tools that you've used for creating content for use in the classroom may have started to integrate in certain features that include virtual reality as well. And a few of those were mentioned in your word cloud. So, what are the opportunities and the benefits? Well, firstly, they are the things that children and young people identify the quickest around this technology. They're always very good at identifying the ways that this can be used for positive purposes and sometimes exploiting the technology to get the most out of it. And there are so many ways, and it can vary from app to app or virtual world to virtual world, and from technology to technology as well. I think the most obvious one to start with is the fact that it is enjoyable. There's a reason why virtual reality headsets have picked up a lot of traction amongst some users as being really fun things to engage with and explore. Being able to play virtual reality games, being able to chat in VR to your friends over virtual reality headsets, enjoying classic games in a very different way through VR. So Minecraft, Roblox, games like Among Us. If you ever tried Among Us in VR, is very, very different to playing Among Us on a games console or a PC. It's a different type of game, definitely, but definitely enjoyable as well. And this ability to lose yourself in it as well. And I think this definitely harks back to the game factor quite frequently. A lot of the reasons many young people and indeed adults as well really enjoy immersing themselves in games is because they can take them away from their day-to-day life and their day-to-day experiences, the positive ones and the negative ones. And immersing yourself in a virtual world where you take on a different role or identity or persona can be a very, very positive thing. And children enjoy doing that, as do adults as well. It allows for exploration and creativity. So you can see on the screen there's an example of Lego Brick Tales that's available on VR headsets, the opportunity to use an augmented reality approach to build in augmented reality using Lego. What a fantastic way of saving costs on Lego, eh? Because Lego is not the cheapest hobby to enjoy. As my brother-in-law will tell you, although he absolutely loves it. But it's a fantastic way to be able to build virtually with Lego. No chance of losing any of the pieces, no chance on accidentally stepping on any of the pieces in the dark either. You can build to your heart's content through this augmented reality experience. So it allows a lot of creativity in different ways. And as you mentioned in the word cloud, games like Minecraft have always been fantastic for exploring and being very, very creative in creating different systems and different worlds. And being able to do that in a virtual environment is much the same too. It also allows for experiences that are more rooted in reality. Now, while taking a walk on the International Space Station is great, it probably doesn't exactly mirror what it's like to be there. But there are a number of different apps and different virtual worlds that do recreate very realistic experiences that you could go and enjoy down here on Earth as well. And that could be things such as visiting an art museum or an exhibition. And it's a really fantastic way of enabling people to enjoy things that are present in the real world that because of physical constraints, maybe they can't go and access. So if you want to go and see an art museum over the other side of the world, you can do that through a virtual reality app rather than having to travel halfway around the world to go and see it. And that's a great way of still being able to experience and enjoy those pieces of art and those pieces in person. It offers great opportunities for people who can't access these things because of other physical limitations. So obviously this year is an Olympics year. It's being run in Paris later in July, which is fantastic. I can remember watching some great videos back in 2021 when we finally got around to the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. Some fantastic videos showing children with quite profound physical disabilities who were confined to wheelchairs, didn't have much motor control or sensory input, were taken to a fantastic place in Japan where they had these virtual reality hubs where they had lots and lots of cameras set up of the major sporting events, and then they were beamed into this virtual reality hub of lots of screens, and these children were able to experience these sporting events as if they were actually there. And that was a really fantastic way for them to engage with these sporting events that they would have struggled to enjoy otherwise. It gives the opportunity to practice skills and techniques. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, simulation are really, really important. And that can be for a variety of different things. It could be for actually carrying out experiments. So if you think from an educational perspective, if you wanted to do a science experiment that maybe carried with it too many risks to be done in the classroom, there might be a way of recreating that in a virtual world where you could test and experiment more safely with no risk of harm. There are lots of very sophisticated simulators out there that have been out there for highly skilled jobs where you need to practice particular skills or techniques that carry with them certain risks. If you think about things such as pilots, they use training simulators regularly to keep up to date with the features of the aircrafts that they fly as well. So lots and lots of ability to practice things and try out things and explore things, but taking away the potential risks and downsides that can be associated with making mistakes or doing things wrong through those particular activities. As I mentioned, accessibility is a really important one. I gave one example of the Tokyo Games and the way that it involved people of all abilities and disabilities as well. And I'm going to show you a video clip on the next slide of another way that it can be used to offer accessible experiences to people who wouldn't be able to engage in those experiences in the physical world otherwise. It's also quite convenient. You know, it's easy. A lot of it now, apart from needing certain hardware, such as VR headsets for some experiences, a lot of it increasingly is being able to be run through the cloud. A lot of it is available at very low cost or no cost at all. So the barrier to entry is coming down all the time. I don't think the adoption of VR headsets is there yet. I don't think we've achieved this metaverse that was bandied around a few years ago. I don't think we're all going to be experiencing all our online interactions through a VR headset anytime soon. But I think that the barriers that have stopped people from using these things in the past are coming down. I think the quality of the experiences across any type of virtual world or immersive environment are on the up. The quality is increasing all the time, and I think that's attracting lots of people to them, and that includes young people as well. And as I kind of mentioned through games as well, this whole idea of this boost to well-being, the fact that, you know, engaging these experiences is fun. It does make you feel better. It takes you away from other troubles or worries you might have. It allows you to explore particular interests and hobbies, and that is something that can definitely be a boost to well-being as well. So bear with me a second, because I have to just switch over to the BBC website to play this clip. Unfortunately, there's no way to embed it in these slides, but I wanted to just show you a really great video from Northern Ireland a couple of years ago, just showing how virtual reality was being used to enable accessible experiences to people with physical disabilities in terms of enjoying music. And I thought this was a really quite innovative and quite interesting one, so I wanted to share it with you. So bear with me just a second. We're just going to get the video up. And you can see how these very talented musicians use virtual reality to engage with their love of music.
It's quite interesting to see people play and discover their musicality in ways that they did not think they would have. Virtual reality musical instruments is a spatial audio technology. Basically, it's a headset that you put on, there's a couple of controllers, and you're immersed in a different reality to create accessible musical instruments. Whenever you touch light with your hands, it triggers a sound, and that goes into an audio engine and produces some interesting results.
I play the instruments on VR using the eye gaze technology. I also have the option of using my hands, but sometimes they don't behave. I can see the real world while I am in VR. It is in black and white. I love the options and freedom the VR allows me to experience any instrument I want. It gives me opportunities I otherwise would not have.
I had an aneurysm that burst.
With a car, in an export machine.
Before this, I would have had various instruments that I'd have played that I couldn't do it now, and I thought, well, that's kind of over. But in actual fact, it was only beginning.
That's what it looks like to you when you're in it. You see the harp in front of you. If I was playing a proper harp.
Well, I play the harp now as well, and I can do it with one hand because this doesn't work. Obviously, I can do it with one hand. I felt that if I could do it, hopefully that will encourage other people to do it as well.
You see lots of smiles and lots of nodding going on in the audience whenever I see this being performed.
Yes, there are still stereotypes and stigmas surrounding different abilities within the arts. It is getting better and more opportunities are available.
It has led me on a journey. I have to pinch myself with the Belfast Orchestra.
We're famous.
I don't know about that.
So there we go, wonderful example there of how virtual reality and these immersive environments was enabling experiences for these disabled people that just wouldn't have been possible otherwise. Bear with me a second, I'm just switching back to my slides, there we go. And obviously that was adults who were taking part in that particular activity, but hopefully that shows the opportunities that are available for young people who maybe have different types of disabilities or different learning needs as well. The fact that you could create instruments in virtual reality that couldn't exist in the physical world, that can be adapted fully to these people's specific needs and their particular preferences about being able to use instruments. And I think that's a really amazing thing. And it also demonstrates as well, you probably saw them using the sort of the MetaQuest headsets there, but obviously the app that was being used within that was created by someone else for the specific purpose of being used by these musicians. And it also shows as well the creativity that's available, and young people will jump on that too. You don't have to be a consumer of the apps that are available on virtual reality, you can construct and build your own for specific purposes. So again, it's another avenue for young people to show off their creative talents and to be able to explore computing skills as well. So that's the positives. Unfortunately, it's not all positive. There are risks and there are considerations around the use of these different technologies and these virtual worlds and spaces. And we're going to cover a number of those throughout the course of the rest of this webinar. But before we dive into it, just a useful place to start is this very useful chart you can see on the screen here from our core evidence-based site, based on the core project of the last couple of years, which has sought to take the existing understanding of online risks that have namely fallen under three of these C's that you see here: content, contact, and conduct. But adding in an up-to-date version of the fourth one, which is known as contract, but then also highlighting the types of risks that exist across different domains, be it aggressive, sexual, and value-based, and also cross-cutting risks that cut right across different areas. So you may be familiar with a number of these things in terms of online safety, and these have been talked about by many people and included in many resources and presentations and training materials in the past. But this is just quite a nice summary of what the core evidence group came up with as an output of something that's a little bit more up to date and covers the broad range of risk that people can face, child or adult, online across these different areas. And the reason for showing you this is because we're going to take this and we're going to take this idea and apply it to virtual worlds and immersive environments over the next few slides to explore each of these four areas of content, contact, conduct, and contract, and then also cross-cutting risks and how those apply in virtual worlds and when using the technologies that allow access to these virtual worlds. So I'm not going to go into too much detail. Sorry, they're all there on the screen. But what I am going to do is I'm going to throw it back over to you again to have a go at the second of our Menti questions, which is what you think the greatest risks are potentially to your learners around the use of virtual worlds and immersive environments. So if you'd like to head back over to the Menti again, and I'm going to just change over the slide to the second word cloud, and you can have a go at entering up to three potential risks to your learners that virtual worlds may pose. And again, I will switch back over to the other word cloud so that you can see that as well. There we go. So you should be able to now see all the details for joining the Menti if you need to again, and having a go at what you think the risks of virtual worlds are to your learners. If you had to pick a top three, what would those be? Great. Okay, so I can see one person's responses already coming in. So we've got things around lies or misinformation. We've got data profiling. We've got addiction. We've got harassment. We've got issues around privacy. We're going to come back to all of these things in a little bit more detail over the next few slides, so don't worry. So this is really great input. Thank you. So this very much is highlighting some of the things that young people do currently experience or may experience in the future across these technologies and these virtual spaces. We've got online violence, which sadly is a case as well. We've got this idea of social distance. So I'm presuming that means creating a social distance between us and our peers and our family because we're connecting via technology rather than face to face. I'll just give you a few more moments to add any other suggestions onto there. And again, a copy of this word cloud will be in the slides as well, but do feel free to take a screenshot at the end before I switch back as well. Brilliant. So we've got some other things popping up here. We've got a disconnect from real life, which I guess can be a benefit and a risk. We've got things such as inappropriate behaviors. We've got exploitation, which I'm afraid sadly is part of this as well. We've got other forms of hateful behavior, such as racism. We've got negative behavior models. So I guess that links in with things such as addiction again and problematic behavior around technologies. Lack of focus, that's an interesting one, definitely. Let's see what we haven't seen. We've got improper use. Brilliant. So very much so some of these obviously are risks that you've identified that stem from the conduct and the behavior and the choices of young people themselves through the use of this technology. Of course, some of these risks are very much coming from other users or from the technology and potentially the companies behind it itself. So there are a number of different factors to consider here, and we are going to cover all of those over the next few slides when we look at these risks in more detail. Oh, yeah, fantastic. Viruses. And in fact, I don't think that's one I've actually mentioned in my slides, but that's a really important one. I think I do talk about cybercrime a bit, but yes, indeed, viruses are present in virtual worlds, just as they are present in other types of devices, games, and apps, and all other forms that they have been in the past. And I can also see it. Cyberbullying has popped up in that list as well, and that's definitely true too. So thank you for that. If you want to enter any more details, then please do feel free. Just for the interest of time, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and move back to the slides so we can consider some of those risks in more detail. But thank you very much for entering your ideas and suggestions. So hopefully you can now see my slides again. We're going to explore all of those that you've mentioned and probably a few more that maybe haven't come up so far. And we're going to explore them across those 4 key domains and also risks that are cross-cutting as well. So let's start with the first one, which is content. So the first thing to understand is, much like other online experiences, be they games or apps or communication tools, not everything that's created in these virtual worlds or through virtual reality or through other technologies is designed solely for children. There is a lot of stuff that's out there that is suitable for audiences of all ages. There is stuff out there that is specifically developed and aimed at and for children, and that's great. But of course, there is stuff that is also specifically aimed at other age audiences, be that older young people or indeed adults as well. I think that's the first thing to understand. And it is a sad reality that certain industries are very good at adopting and utilizing new technology far ahead of the curve of others. And one example over the years with every new emerging technology has been the porn industry, who have been very, very quick to latch onto new technologies and find ways to use that as a medium to deliver pornographic content. And virtual worlds are no different. So, they're very quick to jump onto virtual reality pornographic content back when virtual reality headsets became a thing a number of years ago. And indeed, other types of content that's created through immersive worlds may be content that's adult in nature or show themes that are adult, that may contain violence or quite explicit content, that may contain themes around substance abuse, that may contain themes around topics such as self-harm or even suicide. Lots and lots of things that are not suitable for younger audiences who may be very distressed if they do come across that type of content. And as you can see from the next point, the fact is that certain apps are built by companies and provided for use on these different technologies to create and enable access to these virtual worlds. But some of these virtual worlds allow user-generated content to be created within them. If you want to take a very classic example, Roblox is a great one. It very much hinges on its users building the games and the experiences within Roblox for other users to be able to enjoy and partake in. And many of those are very, very suitable for children, but some of those have had themes in the past and continue to have themes that are not suitable for children, that may be sexual or extremely violent or extremely graphic in terms of what they portray. So there's always this aspect of, yes, a certain company has made an experience or a virtual world, but if it allows for the users of that world to create their own content, then there's always going to be an element of risk there around user-generated content. Many or pretty much all of these platforms and games and services have very clearly defined rules and codes of conduct and terms of use and community standards around what is okay and not okay. But unfortunately, that doesn't stop some users from creating content that breaks those particular community standards. And so that content may still be out there for children and young people to experience, even if it does break the rules on a particular service. So that's something to keep in mind as well, is that children may well come across content that is unsuitable, just as they might do through social media or through apps or games or other online experiences. One key thing to really think about is this whole idea of immersion. Does it lead to a greater impact? If you see, as you can see from the picture, if you see something scary in a virtual world while you're wearing a virtual reality headset, because you're immersed more in that experience and you feel like you're part of it or you're adopting that character, are you more scared as a result when something jumps up in front of you, as opposed to seeing it in a video game where it's just on a screen? Possibly. So there is this whole issue around immersion, is that it's great for immersing yourself in experience and feeling part of it or being a particular character or taking on a particular role. But if it then leads to experiences that are potentially negative in nature, does that have a greater impact on your well-being and your safety as well? And it can vary from experience to experience. And as some of you mentioned, across the word cloud, information disorder, so things like misinformation and disinformation, do also exist in virtual worlds. If they are, again, virtual worlds that allow user-generated content, then people may use those as avenues to push information and messages that are completely false, that are very misleading, or are factually inaccurate in different ways. So there are risks around that as well. And again, you can go back to the point above around immersion. If it's more immersive and children and young people are more sucked into that experience, more engaged with that experience, does that make it easier to push misleading or false messages and having them believe or adopt those messages and the behaviors around those messages? It's possible. It depends. So it's definitely something to consider as well in terms of mis and disinformation. So moving on to the next one, which is contact. And the first thing to understand, again, much like many online spaces and online experiences, be it social media or games or others, a number of these virtual worlds and immersive environments are going to involve a mixture of adults and children. And it's important to help your learners be aware of that, to recognize that they are entering a space where it's not just going to be their peers and people of a similar age, but it could involve adults as well. And in many of those online experiences, it's going to be people that they don't know. It's going to be strangers. So talking and having conversations about how you approach entering spaces where strangers are present is a really important discussion to have. And sometimes a good way of doing that when thinking about virtual worlds is to think about it in an offline context. How would you behave if you walked into an online space where there are 50 strangers? How would you introduce yourself? How would you behave around them in terms of your physical movement? If you get into conversations, what type of questions would you ask? What kind of questions would you expect them to ask you back? What information are you willing to share about yourself? Are you, with virtual worlds that are using microphones, obviously they're going to be able to hear your voice. And the tone of voice and the way that you construct your words and the way you answer things is going to be exactly the same as if you're doing it in an offline space. So having some of those discussions and sometimes transposing the experiences and the considerations of entering a space full of strangers offline can also be taken into the virtual world, and the same kind of considerations can be put in play there as well. Particularly strategies about what to do if it gets too much. Actually in an offline space, if it's a room full of strangers and you're feeling threatened or you're feeling anxious, you can leave that virtual space by walking out of a door. In a virtual world, obviously walking out a virtual door doesn't achieve much, but you can exit that virtual world by taking off a headset or exiting the app or the game. So developing good escape strategies is quite important around this too. The other aspect of this is that unless you're doing a live video chat feed through a virtual reality headset or a virtual world, chances are most of the interactions with other online users is going to be through avatars, either avatars that have been predefined in that game or that world, or avatars that people have developed and defined themselves. And of course, the minute you introduce the opportunity to create avatars, people are obscuring their true identity. Some people will create an avatar that's a very good likeness of themselves. Others will adopt an avatar that looks like their favorite video game or movie or TV show character. And others will create an avatar that is very, very different to who they are as a person in the offline world. So that's another point as well, is to recognize that when you're in a virtual space full of people, all through avatars, that you have to bear in mind that how someone appears isn't necessarily going to relate at all, or not very much, to who they are in the offline world. A number of you mentioned things such as cyberbullying and hateful content such as racism, and indeed that there's evidence out there in the past from different virtual world experiences to suggest that these worlds are vulnerable to those kind of things, just as users can be vulnerable to hate speech on social media platforms and video sharing platforms as well. And one classic example actually is, I don't know if anyone's been watching the Fallout series on Amazon Prime, which is based on a very successful series of video games. My son's in the room here, his ears have just perked up at that one. A very popular series of video games that have been around for a couple of decades now, the Fallout games, and most of them are single player offline experiences, but there is a persistent online one called Fallout 76 that came out about 7 or 8 years ago, which is very, very popular now, and lots of users have flocked to because they've watched the TV show inspired by these games on Amazon recently. But actually when Fallout 76 first came out, it had a very, very rocky launch, and there were a number of reports of people ganging up on other people in these virtual spaces, following people around and harassing them, and actually using racist and misogynistic and homophobic language towards other players, to the point where it felt very much like being stalked and being harassed in an offline experience or the offline world as well. So these things are things that don't happen to all players and all online users, but there are experiences where, you know, there is some precedent for that, and these things can and do happen. And that's important to prepare children for as well, is that they may be entering environments that look okay on the outside, but could actually be very, very toxic once you start getting into conversations with other users and start to observe their behaviors. And then there is also this other aspect of unwanted contact on these platforms may feel more intrusive than it does on other platforms. So in many online games, if you want to add someone as a contact or a friend, you send them a message pops up on your screen and you accept or decline it. Same with things such as social media for friends and followers. But in virtual worlds and virtual games, that can vary dramatically. For some people, that might be a message popping up in your headset to add someone to a particular friends list or followers list. In other experiences, it could be over audio, and even if you've disengaged from a particular chat with them, or you're not in the same physical virtual space with them, you might still be able to hear someone talking to you over the audio chat, so that can be a little bit more pervasive than other forms of communication. And in some cases, when it is in a virtual space with avatars being able to move around and interact with each other, it could be someone actually coming up and invading your personal space or following you around, as per the Fallout 76 example, and not leaving you alone. So this unwanted contact from other people can feel more intrusive in these virtual spaces because of the more immersive nature of them. It's not just a message on the screen, it could be actually someone getting very, very close up in your personal space and not leaving you alone, and being very persistent in requesting that you talk to them or interact with them. So that's another aspect to consider too. Moving on to conduct risks, and again, a number of those have been reflected in the previous slide, but as you mentioned in the word cloud, bullying can take place in many different online experiences. And again, virtual worlds and immersive environments offer yet another avenue for someone who wishes to bully or harass another user to do so. And because bullying in many cases operates across multiple domains and multiple platforms, so it's not always just putting a nasty comment under someone's YouTube video or a nasty comment under someone's Instagram post. It might also involve threatening phone calls or text messages. It might involve other sort of behaviors on gaming platforms where you know that person is as well. This is now adding just another element and another place for where bullying may occur as part of a more concerted approach by a bully. And I think that's important to make young people aware of, is that just because this technology is new and immersive and offers these virtual worlds doesn't mean it's immune to the risks that have been faced in things that have come before, such as apps and games. You know, I've already talked about the Fallout 76 example, but there's other forms of harassment that take place in these virtual worlds, particularly around VR chat experiences where people enter this space to be able to chat with people they don't know. There have been plenty of reports in the past of people's personal space being invaded, for one thing, but also things such as sexual harassment taking place where people have been using their avatars to make particular unacceptable gestures, or obviously talking and using unacceptable language towards people, or propositioning people to do things that make them feel uncomfortable or pressured as well. So unfortunately, things such as gender-based violence, which takes place on social media and through games, can also take place in virtual worlds as well. I've already talked about the invasion of personal space as an issue, which actually led to a number of app developers and device manufacturers to introduce this whole idea of an invisible barrier around your avatar in many experiences, to actually physically create a personal space that can't be invaded by anyone's avatar when you are engaging in that environment. And those are really useful features, and it's important to make young people aware that some of these features do exist, that in some apps and some experiences you can't get right up nose to nose with another person's avatar to communicate with them, that there are ways of engaging with and creating some personal space there. And there may be other safety tools as well that can be explored, and we'll come back to that in the tips in a moment. And of course, the other risk around conduct in terms of interacting with others is this ability to disclose private information. And of course, if you're interacting with strangers, that can be very tricky if you give away details that allow you to be contacted off platform or off experience or off world. So that can include things like email addresses or phone numbers, or, you know, usernames for social media profiles. But of course, it can include all the other classic private and personal data that we encourage children not to share too widely online as well, such as where they live or where they go to school. Obviously, things such as passwords. Displaying photos and videos can be done and shared through certain virtual worlds and experiences. And again, the same risks around those and disclosing personal data apply as well. And indeed, In some of these spaces, young people may feel that some of their inhibitions drop away as opposed to other online experiences like social media and messaging. They might feel less inhibited when they're in this virtual space surrounded by other avatars. They may feel more willing to open up and disclose more sensitive details about their lives and their private lives, which then might be used against them in some way or might be disclosed more widely to the public. So really important to consider those things as well. And then finally, the fourth of those 4 key risk areas was this idea of contract, which is very much around things such as data collection by companies themselves, but also other aspects of exploitation around data and user experience. So the first one here we can see is really important to recognize that device manufacturers and app manufacturers for these virtual worlds and these virtual experiences do collect various types of data as part of this. Now, a number of this data collection may be to improve those experiences, getting feedback from users on how to make these things more immersive or to make the features more streamlined or more natural or more intuitive. And that's all perfectly understandable. But there is some quite sophisticated data collection that's going on behind some of these experiences. It could be things around biometric data, such as face recognition or even, retina scans in some cases, but also picking up on things such as user gaze. So where a user on a VR headset is directing their gaze throughout a digital experience and a virtual experience, but also things such as the emotions that are displaying on their face. Sometimes those kind of details are captured and fed back to the app developers and creators as well as the types of behaviors that users are displaying when they are in this actual virtual world or virtual experience. And all of that is personal data. It's a form of personal data that maybe we haven't talked to children much about in the past, but it is an important form of personal data that they need to be aware of that is being collected by these developers. And what they do with that personal data as a result isn't always clear and isn't always transparent. And that is something to keep in mind. There's also the aspect, I think a number of you mentioned on the word cloud, around this whole idea of addiction or problematic use. And just like other forms of online experiences, again, virtual worlds aren't immune to persuasive design features, ones that are designed to get users to engage with things for longer, ones that may be designed to engage users in watching or looking at advertising that generates revenue for the company, ones that maybe persuade users to spend real money on in-game features or in experience features as well. So all of those types of techniques are available there that might be nudging users towards less safe or less data safe behaviors or behaviors that can have a financial impact on them too. And then of course we've got issues such as cyber criminals, and someone did obviously mention viruses in the word cloud or the risks there. So again, VR headsets, virtual worlds and other immersive experiences are not immune to being hacked, to being exploited, to having malicious code such as viruses or Trojans or other malware injected into them that can steal personal data or hack into other users' accounts or steal virtual property or currency, both virtual and real as well. So all of those kind of things can happen too. Similarly, in terms of exploitation as well, a contact risk with strangers is always the chance to be exploited, but cyber criminals will try and exploit users as well into disclosing personal data. Again, this could be another form of sextortion if it's an experience that's really designed for adults, but young people are engaging with it and it's quite explicit or offers the opportunity to share photos or videos that maybe are of an intimate nature. Then again, cyber criminals may latch on that in order to steal that content and use that as an attempt to sextort a user as well. So all of those kind of things that are present across different things like social media and apps and games can take place in virtual worlds too. And then lastly, as I mentioned, this whole idea of spending real money. It could be because you've been nudged into it by persuasive design features, or just because you really become quite immersed in an online experience and you want to spend real money to enjoy that experience further. You want to unlock extra levels or extra functionality or features. And there's no problem with that to a degree, but of course with young people and children, there is the potential risk of spending too much money or more money that they have. There are again, online experiences out there that can encourage gambling behaviors as well, which can be problematic if young people become involved with them too. So again, all of those kind of things that may prompt young people to spend too much money in online experiences like games and apps are also present in virtual worlds, just in a slightly different form. And then the last area that you saw at the bottom of that chart that we saw a little bit earlier are the idea of these cross-cutting risks, ones that maybe, as it sounds, cut across those different risk areas, but also have potentially short-term and long-term impacts on individuals and groups and indeed societies as well. So the first one, I think a few of you did mention this in the word cloud too, is the whole idea around physical well-being. What is an okay amount of time to spend in a virtual world or using a VR headset? Different experts and different people have different perspectives and opinions on this. What is the age you should be to first start using this type of technology? Again, people have been in disagreement. There's been a lot of discussion about what is okay or not okay for younger children as well. So all of this type of stuff has the ability to impact on both physical and mental well-being, but also the fact that when you're using a VR headset or you're engaging in a virtual world, depending on the nature of that experience, it could be a very energetic one where you're getting quite physical, you're playing a virtual sport or doing a lot of physical movement, so it could actually be beneficial for health and lifestyle, or it could be one that's far more sedentary where you actually sat around and you're not moving very much. And actually, in the same way that the video games could present that risk of or developing poor habits around things such as diet, or there are one or two links with video games around potential obesity as well. Again, virtual worlds and the use of virtual worlds can present those same risks depending on the type of experience there too. There's also this whole idea of your lifestyle. If this starts to become a pattern of behavior in your lifestyle, is it something that's adding to your physical well-being as a daily routine, or is it something that's causing some form of detriment to it? And of course, then the mental side, which is a little bit trickier. So just like other forms of experiences online and other forms of media, virtual worlds and virtual experiences and immersive experiences have the capacity to affect our mood. They are, in some cases, another art form, just such as film and TV show and music and actual artwork and video games are as well. And so they have the potential to affect mood. Where there is the potential to affect mood, then there are positives and there are potential drawbacks too. And of course, that can be both in terms of the short term and the long term. So if someone's playing something that's leading to heightened anxiety or anger or aggression or upset or worry or concern or any other negative emotions, then of course that's going to be problematic if they're experiencing those on a regular basis through these virtual worlds. And that may have a longer term impact on their mental health and well-being. There's also this interesting question around identity that we're not able to answer at the moment. How are people's identities shaped by using virtual worlds and immersive experiences? Particularly when you can adopt a different persona or identity in these spaces that doesn't match the one that you have in the offline world. What happens if you spend a prolonged period of time, and we're talking years here, but what if you spend years and years in the virtual world in one persona? Do you become that persona? Do your offline behaviors change to move towards that persona? Is your identity now a mixture of that persona and your offline identity? Some really big questions that we can't answer here, and but things that we need to explore, we need to make young people aware of, is that actually when you are adopting a different persona online, whether it's a virtual world or not, that has the potential to affect you mentally, both in the short term and the long term as well. And another really important cross-cutting risk is this whole idea of the digital divide, which I think was really brought into sharp focus throughout the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, of highlighting those with access to technology in order to continue accessing education and services and other experiences online, and those who didn't have the same kind of access. And I think sometimes virtual worlds can further sharpen and focus the haves and the have-nots around this. The fact that, yes, the barrier to entry is coming down, but many of these experiences still require the use of some form of VR headset. That technology in many cases is still not particularly cheap, particularly for the most immersive and the most high quality forms. And again, that is potentially having the impact of widening that digital divide too. And then for all these things, as I've already mentioned, the long-term impact. What are the implications of using a VR headset for 20 years? What are the implications of spending 3 or 4 hours a day in a virtual world for 2 decades? We don't know, because we haven't reached that point yet. But they are important questions to bring up, and they are important questions to discuss with our learners as well, to get them thinking about these potential implications that could well happen within their lifetime. So how do you support your learners? Well, the first thing is to not be too afraid of this technology, that it comes in many different forms. It could be used in many different capacities, many of it for very much in terms of benefit for education as well. So lots of great educational experiences that are available for VR headsets and through other simulations and immersive activities as well. So it's well worth exploring those with your learners, but also asking them what they like to use as well. What are their favorites? What have they tried? What haven't they tried? How did they feel about it? Maybe if you have the opportunity and the ability in school and the technology available, exploring those things together as a group so you can bring up some of these risks and concerns, but also identify the great opportunities that they can all engage with as well. And that really covers the next 2 points, really taking the time to talk about these risks, but also recognise the huge benefits that this can offer to all online users, including children and young people, is really important as well. Gives you a deeper understanding about how and why they love to use these things, and you can give them the relevant advice for how to mitigate against some of those risks that we've talked about throughout this webinar. One really good way, and this applies to all online experiences as well, to be fair, is to really go in and have a look for where the safety features are. As I mentioned, some of them have introduced this mandatory invisible space around you to create personal space, but just like other forms of interaction, like social media and games, it's really great to encourage learners to look out for report buttons, block buttons, and other safety features that can be used to get help in-game or in-app or in-experience if something happens that threatens their safety or well-being. It's also about talking about healthy balance and boundaries. You know, what is an acceptable amount of time for your learners to use a VR headset or to spend in a virtual world? They may have very differing opinions, but talking about that and talking about how you balance that with offline experiences and other pursuits to make sure you're not living your life just purely through a virtual world or through a screen are really important things to discuss too. And these discussions may take place in the classroom with your learners, but you can extend those discussions out with families as well in your school community, talking to them about how to establish boundaries in their family about healthy and positive use of virtual reality and virtual world technology can be really useful to them too. And like all other forms of things that children love to use online, it's about its application as a tool and recognizing that it can be used as a tool rather than a feature that's going to very much take over their lives and rule them. So it's very much about establishing control and being able to take control over these types of technologies to work for them rather than potentially against them. And that's always a great standpoint to take, I think, on these types of topics. So hopefully you found those things really useful. We covered a broad range of risks there, and you'd notice a lot of parallels with other types of online experiences. It's just the way that it plays out in virtual worlds might be slightly nuanced or quite contextually bound. But very much having open discussions around this, exploring these and keeping those discussions open with children and young people is the key. A couple of useful things on the screen for you to check out that are very helpful to help take this further. One is a great article that we have on our Better Internet for Kids portal about helping keeping children and young people safe in virtual worlds, and it covers a number of the points that I've talked about today. But if you scroll down to the bottom of that article, there's a fantastic list of resources that are available in different EU countries that have been developed by National Safer Internet Centres to help teachers and young people and parents and carers understand these areas better. So you can have a look for resources available in your country in that list as well. And if you're interested to learn about what's happening behind the scenes in terms of the European Commission's approach to this, they've put together a strategy in terms of virtual worlds and what we term Web 4.0, this use of virtual worlds and immersive environments. And they've created a strategy with 4 key pillars, enabling everyone to be able to use this positively and safely with no one left behind. So you can learn more about that from the fact sheet that's linked to on this link here. And that gives you a nice overview and summary of the work that the European Commission has started and will be doing over the next number of years to help facilitate this and facilitate equal and positive access to this type of technology. So, one last thing before we finish is to put a call out for our BIK Teacher voice panel. And I think I've done this in previous webinars, but well worth mentioning again. If you have an awareness and interest in online safety and working with children and young people to help them be safe online, if you have an interest in understanding whole school approaches to online safety, and if you have an interest in a wide range of topics around online safety, be it cyberbullying, misinformation, online gaming, virtual worlds, then we'd love to hear from you and we'd love to have you involved in our BIK Teacher Voice panel. The link is on the slides here and also available on our website. And you can see the details of being able to participate in the call on the left-hand side there. But if you are interested, then we'd love to have a response from you. We'd love to continue that discussion further with you. So please do reach out to us. So that brings us to the end. My email address is on the screen. So if you do have any questions, then we've got a couple of minutes to answer those on the call. But do feel free to reach out to me via email as well. And I will pop that into the chat in a second for easy access too. But thank you so much for taking the time to join this webinar. I hope you found it useful and I wish you a very pleasant evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Gareth. I just wanted to take a moment to thank all our participants for joining us on this Thursday afternoon, and huge thanks to you, Gareth, as well for this webinar. I think it was incredibly useful. I don't see any questions on the chat at the moment. I'm just pasting our email addresses again. If you have any comments or questions at any point, feel free to contact us. And thank you very much, everyone, again, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you, everyone.